Hello again and welcome back to London. The latest German ZEW survey shows that economists are increasingly gloomy on the biggest economy in the Eurozone. So what does this mean for the ECB's bond prime programme and the Euro as a whole? Well, I've been speaking to Craig Erlam from Oanda. Craig, what do you make of these ZEW numbers?
Firstly, I think there's really two factors that you can really take from it. Firstly, we are seeing an ongoing improvement in the economic sentiment around the Eurozone. Now, this can be driven both by the fact that we've got this depreciated euro, which is anticipated to improve trade for the Eurozone members, although we're not seeing enormous amounts of evidence from it so far. But then the other aspect that we've got to take from this is that confidence is still very fragile, and things like this ongoing Greece negotiations, ongoing talk of a Brexit, and the threat that this may pose to such a fragile economic recovery is having an impact too. In the last couple of months we've seen a sharp, in the last month particularly, we've seen a sharp pullback in these economic surveys. The German composite suffered last month. We've seen the European Commission economic surveys as well reflect that confidence is depreciated as a result of these ongoing Greek talks, and as long as they continue and as long as the threat of a Greek exit remains, then I think we are going to see confidence remain very fragile. And it's not exactly surprising. This recovery is only just getting going, and if we do see Greece exit the Eurozone or default on its debts, we've heard so many times that we don't know that the ramifications from it is going to be much milder than it would have been in 2010. The threat of contagion amongst the region's banks is going to be much lower, but I don't think we actually know what the exact ramifications will be. So we don't know exactly how much the banks will suffer. We don't know how much the ECB would lose if we did see a default. We don't know what effect this would have on trade. So I think this impact on business spending, on consumer spending, is going to be very real, and that's what these surveys really reflect.
Yeah, so these sentiment surveys are interesting. When I look down the weekly calendars of economic releases, this one always gets a high importance no matter where you look. But really, the fact that 350 German economists have a more negative outlook of the German economy a week after they've had poor GDP, it's hardly surprising, is it?
No, it's not really that surprising, but then again, it's one of the few forward-looking data releases we have. And to be honest, especially when you're talking about the Eurozone, we can talk about, oh, well, the last 12 months was quite morbid. We saw little growth. We're only just starting to see growth returning in the first quarter, although apart from Spain, the figures were nothing to really write home about. We need these forward-looking economic indicators to find anything positive to really grasp onto. We're not going to become more encouraged. We're not going to become more optimistic about the Eurozone until we start seeing some data reflecting that businesses, that consumers are feeling more optimistic, because without that we won't see any kind of economic recovery. We need these surveys to improve, and what you'll eventually see is that once we do start to see the economy improving, we'll stop focusing on these as much. We never used to focus on these PMI readings. We never used to focus so much on these ZEW. It's only when you've got this massive economic downturn and when you've got this stagnation and when you really need to see some form of recovery, when you've got a weak euro as a result of strong central bank action, these are the first things that are going to show any sign of an economic recovery, and that is why they're so important all of a sudden. Yeah,
let's broaden this out to the ECB, its QE programme. Various ECB board members are now starting to talk about the rise in the bund yields and how this could potentially cause problems. Why are they suddenly getting so concerned about the debt market in Europe?
Well, I think volatility is going to be the first thing. It's the first thing that springs to my mind. All the time we hear from central bankers talking about how the volatility is obviously good for the all financial markets. It's what traders want to see. We want to see volatility. But then there is such a thing as excessive volatility. And I think what we've seen in the bond markets, particularly over the last 2 weeks, but really over the last month, ever since German yields were these record lows of 0.077%, we've seen excessive volatility, and what this spurs is panic. And when you start seeing panic in the market, you see these enormous moves, and these can be quite dangerous, and this is not what central bankers want to see. So the comments that we've seen today from one particular executive board member is effectively an attempt to talk down these moves, to reassure investors that this is not just going to go one way, that they don't want to see this kind of volatility. So this talk this morning that they want to they may front end some of these asset purchases in order to calm the bond market. I think that's the main reason why. It's more they don't want excessive volatility, and they don't want people being burned as a result.
Yeah, there's also talk that they're also concerned about the strength of the euro and how it offsets any achievements from QE. If that is true, we've seen the euro appreciated about 10% versus the dollar since its lows. In fact, if they just put an artificial ceiling on the euro about that 112, 113 mark, anywhere above there, the ECB is going to get uncomfortable.
Well, I think that has to play into it, and we've heard more from central bankers recently. I think that while they can't focus on the strength of the currency, it does play a large part in their monetary policy decisions. It was Mark Carney only the other day during the Bank of England inflation report said, well, no, we're not going to gear our monetary policy towards the strength of the pound, but it does factor into our decision because it does affect inflation, it affects trade, it affects our current account balance, it affects a number of things which all feed into our calculations for our inflation outlooks, and therefore on what our monetary policy decision and what our monetary policy stance is. And I don't think that's any different for the ECB. They know that a stronger euro threatens the economic recovery. They knew when they implemented QE, negative interest rates and the rest, that this was going to have a negative impact on the euro, and that was going to support trade and support the recovery as a whole. So they can't be too complacent. If they see the euro appreciating, whether they want to start or get involved in these currency wars or not, they have to acknowledge it as a threat, and they have to almost warn the markets. And we've seen that so much from different central banks over the past couple of years. I don't think it's anything new.
Well, thank you to Craig. More London Direct come later in the week, but for now, goodbye.